All right, everybody. The Celtics continue rolling back to 5 wins in a row after beating the Washington Wizards. Big night from Sam Hauser, big night from Jason Tatum. We're going to get into it and get you set up for the week ahead in the stretch run here with the Celtics. This is Green with Envy. Let's lock in. What up, what up, what up, what up? Welcome into another edition of Green with Envy. As always, it's your boy Will Weir checking in. How you doing? How you living? Joining me today, it's another 3-man weave episode. So we got the whole trio in the building. First up, we got my best friend, co-host, and the coach of our podcast, the one and only Greg Menakis. How you doing, my G?
I want to turn it back to you, my dude. I know yesterday was your anniversary. You just gave a giggle before we started recording that reminded me of many a giggle of hungover Will that was still pretty much blackout. So did you drink a ton on your anniversary? How are you feeling today?
So here's the best gift that I've ever been given. I was very tired yesterday. I had brunch with Greg and his fiance. We had a friend in town, and took a nap. Woke up, and my fiance said, "Do you want to move our reservation to next week? We're both kind of tired. We didn't even go to dinner last night. We sat on the couch, ordered food, and had a great fucking night. I'm just tired.
Okay.
That's all this is. There is zero alcohol that was consumed yesterday. In fact, that was the reason that we moved our entire anniversary to next week so that we could actually enjoy it. So you are just getting Will about 2 sips into his first cup of coffee is
Well,
what we're
speak
dealing with today on the
I love
podcast.
that. Speaking of coffee, though, Adam said he was drinking some coffee. And Adam, I noticed you had a little bit more pep in your step, your voice. Maybe it's just like that weird thing sometimes when you listen to music in the morning and the song just sounds faster than normal. But you sound peppy. How you feeling, man?
Yo, dude, I had a long ass night. I'm good though. I woke up about 5 a.m., so I've been awake 8 hours by now, like ish. So yeah, if I don't have pep in my step now, the entire day is wasted, man, because something went wrong
Something's gone
somewhere.
wrong at this point. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm all right, man. I'm all right. I'm surviving, thriving, trying not to be unalive today. So just living.
Well, it's glad we got everybody here together. It's early morning Monday as we're recording this. For Greg and I, it's about mid-afternoon for Adam. So we're recording this ahead of Celtics Pistons. So if you're listening to this, just know that this is the morning of Celtics Pistons, and we're coming off the Celtics 130-104 victory against the Wizards. 5 in a row now for the Boston Celtics. And the biggest story of the night absolutely has to be our guy, Sam Hauser, going bananas. 10 of 13 from the 3-point line. Did leave the game with a little bit of a twisted ankle. I've been looking for an update this morning. I don't think we've had too many updates yet on it. Didn't come back because, well, it was the Wizards. Game wasn't very competitive. Like there wasn't a reason to, but ends up coming up just short. Was really about to go for the Celtics all-time single game record, which you guys know who. I'm assuming you guys after last night, you guys know who it's held by, right?
Marcus.
Trivia question. Yeah. Marcus Smart, 11 threes. That's still, I think, one of the funniest records for Celtics history is that Marcus Smart, of all people, holds the single game record. But Sam Hauser goes nuts last night. Greg, let's start with you here. What were your thoughts on Sam's big night?
Well, he probably should have had 11. Like, I think maybe it was first three of the game they called Horford for a moving screen, but you just saw from that shot that Hauser was just completely locked in. And I called at somewhere around like his third or fourth somewhat big game where he had like 3 or 4 threes last year. I said Sam Hauser at some point is going to have a 40 ball. Right. And I thought that this was the night. I was like, Sam's going to have that 40 ball that I referenced over a year ago. And then he sprains his ankle. They were looking for him. This is something that we've been talking a lot about on this pod is weaponizing Sam. And it felt like with all the guys out, with Derek White out, with Jaylen Brown out, with Kristaps out, this was the first time they really said, you know what, Sam Hauser being on the court, let's see how we can weaponize him. And they absolutely did. Once he got hot, you saw people flying out at Sam Hauser towards the end of his stint. And if you have Hauser on the court and he's shooting like that, which is obviously a little bit of an anomaly, but it's going to open so many more things up for people. But I was just overall just so happy for Sam that he had that game.
Yeah, it's down to usage rate, right? I feel like we would have seen 10 of these games by now from Sam if there was more opportunity for him to actually get these shot attempts, the volume of shot attempts. Obviously, when you've got the hot hand, you get fed. I was a big fan in the way they didn't look for him in the same way more than twice. And what I mean by that is there was a lot of they didn't run him off like screens more than twice. They'd go to like little shovel passes, handoffs, get him cutting. They just continually found different ways to get him in little shooting pockets. And I genuinely believe in you. People can push back all they want, but in terms of movement shooting, I don't think there's many better movement shooters in the NBA than Sam Hauser. Just in terms of being able to catch the ball and then pull up straight without a dribble. And I'm talking role players here. Please do not come at me saying that, Steph and that. I'm genuinely speaking role players. So being able to weaponize him, being able to get the production you got out of him with so many people missing, and he managed to do a little bit defensively as well. That was big. It just sucked that it ended the way it ended. Like,
Right.
on the trip in front of the away bench, well, in front of the home bench, sorry, in front of the Wizards bench.
Felt like an away game for them.
An away game as far as I'm concerned, but it was just like, it sucked that it happened in front of the Wizards bench. I'm calling it shenanigans. I think someone should. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about it this morning, like, what more could we have asked for from a Sam Hauser season? Like, if you had realistic expectations, like going into this of what you were looking to get from Sam Hauser, you're getting 21 minutes a night, 8.5 points a game, 3.5 rebounds, shooting 43% from 3-point land. Like, and then I think probably the cherry on top is sustainable, like real defense, right? Like, not like he's not a sieve out there. He's not just getting burnt, left and right. Like, he's holding up in a lot of. We point this out consistently in like big games where it's like, hey, you see that play where Sam Hauser held up against Aaron Gordon in the in the post? Like, that's a real thing that you can actually rely on Sam. And so when I think back to what the expectation of what this might look like for a Sam Hauser season, being a fully equipped member of this rotation, and he's either met or exceeded your expectations. Like, there can't be a single person out there that has fallen below. It's either he's met or he has blown by. And I think seeing last night, there's Greg, you kind of said it a little bit earlier. There's a certain way that Sam releases the ball where you're just like, oh, it's one of those nights where he might not touch the net. Like, it just feels like every time that shot goes up, and you can tell after one or two makes, you're just like, I don't think, like, if Sam right now, he might do the full, that video of Steph Curry that was floating around the other day for his birthday where he makes 105 threes in a row from the corner. Like, sometimes it feels like Sam might be able to do that too. Like, if he just has one of those nights, has one of those strokes going where it's like, I just don't know if this guy can miss. And so, you guys have talked about it. Just weaponizing him, I think, is it's been such a needed addition for this team that I've harped on for a couple seasons of wanting to have something like this. And now with Sam Hauser being, consistently 43%, top 10 in the league, and shoots them at a really high volume, 5.5 per game. Out of that top 10, only Malik Beasley has had more 3-point attempts this season and shot it at a higher rate than Sam Hauser. So just a massive a massive like statement by Sam Hauser last night.
Yeah, for sure. One thing with Sam that I always like to keep an eye on is how many games does he have with 3 or more 3-pointers. So as I'm continuing to look this up and add it manually, because I'm not good with stat finding on the internet, Adam, maybe you're able to just type something into some search engine that you have and find this out. But I'm manually counting, going all the way through January. I'm at like 12 games from yesterday's game back through January, 12 games where he's had 3 or more 3-pointers. So Adam, if you want to talk for a little bit while I finish my counting, feel free to talk more about Sam Hauser.
Yeah, no worries. I will say that you just need to get good at using filters on stats.nba.com, and everything else starts to come easier. But those filters take a while to navigate because it's not the most user-friendly website. Yeah, I mean, if we're sticking on the Sam thing for a moment, the one thing I would have liked to have seen, if we're nitpicking and just because for the entertainment purposes, I've got the jitters here off all the coffee, would be I wanted a dunk, man. Like, some of these Hauser dunks earlier in the season were like super fun just because you don't expect them. It's Sam Hauser,
Slam Hauser.
He's white, not meant to be dunking. Okay, cool. But we've got some Slam Hauser. I like it. I would have liked one. I feel like there was a world where we could have got like a Sam alley-oop off a secondary cut with Peyton Pritchard was just carving the defense open with
Yeah.
those little shovel passes that he was doing.
He was
Those
awesome.
one-handed shovel passes. I just really I think if you were going to end it there, like having that Sam Hauser dunk would have been nice. But other than that, like, I'm cool. Like, I think that this was a really good offensive production from him. I think that again they didn't really stick to the script in terms of just spamming the same action over and over. And I am gonna give some kind of context here. The Wizards defense is bad, like bad.
It's very bad.
So the fact that he got that many threes up was partially because there was no resistance there, right? But I do like the fact that he looked at Jordan Poole and was like, bitch, you can't shoot as many threes as me and hit as many threes as me because I ain't a bitch. I didn't get punched in the face. That's all I'm saying.
Well, here's the thing, though. Like, you also think about, when we haven't touched on this at all, no KP, no JB, no Derek White, right? So you're missing half of your top 6 rotation in this game. So there is a lot more opportunity for Sam Hauser. And so when he sees, the Wizards on defense, the green light was going to be open last night. There was shots to go around, and, he was happy to jump in and take them, and he stepped up when he got his chance.
I finished counting. 29 games. 29 games. So Sam Hauser has played 66 games. 29 of those 66, he's had 3 or more 3-pointers, which is almost half of them. And he's only had 7 of those 66 games in which he has not made a 3-pointer. So when you think about coming off the bench and consistency, I know, Will, one of your favorite stats from last year was that Sam Hauser played 80 out of 82 games, 16 minutes a game. This year, he's played 66 games thus far. 21 minutes per game or 22 minutes per game. And just think about what you want out of your role players and out of your bench. All you want is consistency. So 29 out of the 66, 3 or more 3-pointers, only 7 out of the 66, 0 3-pointers. That's about as consistent as you can get from a role player off the bench. And, when we signed Sam Hauser to that super team friendly deal a couple seasons ago, everybody was like, oh, like that might end up being a steal for the Celtics. Like, he's definitely shown some flashes, and it 100%. He's like all the return on investment. He's like, investing in, and I don't know if I want to go all the way to like investing in Bitcoin back in like 2013, but like he's definitely, all of the stock that we've put into Sam Hauser coming off the bench, being that movement shooter that we've wanted for years. Mm-hmm. It's surpassed all of our expectations. Shout out to Sam for having the game of his life. Hopefully that's not too bad of an ankle sprain, because it didn't look great. He stepped back into, I think it was Jared Butler's foot on the bench. I don't know if there were any shenanigans there. It didn't seem like they tried to do that. But, as I was watching the game, I was like, damn, Sam, because I was watching it a little bit on delay. I was like trying not to look at Twitter, trying not to look at the box score as the game's going on. I was like, is Sam going to go for like 15 threes? Like, is he going to set the NBA record? Because he definitely could have.
Because that was middle of the third, I think, when he rolled the ankle and went out. So there was, plenty of time. And, he probably would have got a little rest towards the end, but he wasn't going to get the Tatum, Horford, Holiday rest where they just didn't play basically, the majority of the second half. Like, he was going to have a chance to go for that record. And, Adam mentioned Peyton Pritchard, 13 assists, career high for him. Like, certainly Pritchard was looking for him. I know Pritchard talked about in the post game with Abby Chin a little bit, just how he thinks he's like, Sam's one of the best shooters in the world. Like, anyone who's not doesn't realize this, they're not paying attention. They're not watching, Sam Hauser. And as a team, Celtics have just hit 49 threes in the last 2 games, which is pretty absurd. But Sam's one of the things that for me, as this team over the last several seasons, has wanted to be pretty heavy involved in 3-point shooting. It's like, well, we need really, really good 3-point shooters if we're going to do that. And I think, in years past, we had a lot of average shooters that were shooting a lot of threes. Now we have 4 guys that are in the Celtics lineup consistently that are all shooting 40% or better from 3. And then you add Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown on top of that. Like, that's a pretty dangerous combination when you think about this team, not only weaponizing Sam, but really weaponizing that 3-point shot. But I did mention earlier, so I want to transition us to another topic here. So there were some guys out last night. No Jaylen Brown, no Derek White. That was new. Seems like we're going to see a lot of, and this is, I think, kind of a precursor to what we're going to see over these next couple of weeks, where there's a lot more Wizards, a lot more Pistons, a lot more Hawks and Bulls coming the way. So I think we're going to see a lot of nights where there's only 3 out of the 6, 4 out of the 6 guys, the main guys that are going to be playing each and every night. Of course, back-to-backs, I would expect most back-to-backs, we don't see KP and Al at some point, or we split them, or whatever that's going to look like. But Kristaps Porzingis now out for, I believe this is 5 straight games. So basically, this whole win streak, Kristaps Porzingis has not been on the court. And I know we touched on this last episode, but I just want to do a quick temperature check with you guys. I'll start with you. I'm just checking. We're not worried, right? Right? There's no worry. Is there, Adam?
No, not yet. I think that the biggest issue for me is the lack of information we have, right? It was kind of, hey, KP's out. He's got, what is it, a calf strain or a thigh strain? Or
Hamstring.
Hamstring.
Yeah, hamstring. There we go. Calf, thigh, hamstring. It was one of the three. KP's out and he's got a strain. Okay, cool. Like, and if I remember correctly, the first game he missed was leading into a back-to-back, so it just looked normal. Or it was the game before a back-to-back, so you're like, oh, he's getting the extra games rest.
Yeah, it was that Portland game last week.
Yeah, so he's going to miss that game. Then he's going to miss the first game of the back-to-back. He'll be back for the second night. Then he's not. Then you're like, okay, so they're just giving him some extra rest. They're being careful. And now we're kind of like 5 games in without KP. And we still don't know what the hell's wrong, whether there's a time frame, how it happened. Like, it's just been so hush-hush. That can give people a cause for concern in itself. But generally, I'm kind of like, there's so much time between now and the postseason. Like, you've still got to get through. When the season ends, you've got the playing tournament that the Celtics get to sit out of. You've got a bit of time you can wait. So I'm not concerned, but the sooner we see him back on the floor, the happier I think everybody's going to be.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely starting to get slightly concerned just because, they're not going to sit him just to sit him. I think there has to be some sort of medical reason to be sitting KP. They're not just experimenting, right? There's something going on with that hamstring. And this has always been the concern with Kristaps Porzingis from the moment we got him, especially a guy being 7'3", a history of some lower extremity issues, is that this exact situation could happen, right? And we did talk about it on the live stream that we did on Thursday. If he does have something going on, there's just no reason right now to be playing him because you do know that he is that cheat code that we've talked about throughout this season. So when you have a 9.5 game lead, there's just really no, if he has even the slightest hesitation that it's not 100%, there's literally no need to be playing him against the freaking Wizards. Why would we be playing KP unless KP was like, I just want to continue to get revenge against the Wizards? But why would he even want to get revenge against the Wizards? They're the team that allowed him to be one of the featured scorers in the offense and allowed him to have the best season of his career. So if anything, he's just like, yeah, that was a great time in Washington. Now I'm in my dream scenario in Boston, So there's just no need to play KP until he's 100%. I don't expect to see him tonight. I do expect to see him on Wednesday against the Bucks, though.
So that's where I want to go, because I think for me, like I said, with all these Detroit, Chicago, Atlanta games, there's really, I was just looking through it. There's about 2 games that I really would like to see KP, just as to your point, Adam, data collection. I want to see what it looks like in games that are going to matter. And one of them is this Milwaukee game coming up on Wednesday. So that for me, because if KP even wakes up on the wrong side of the bed, just don't play him against Detroit. Don't play him against Atlanta. Don't play him for any of those teams. I don't care. That's not going to be consequential in any way for us by the time we get to the playoffs. But I think this Milwaukee game on Wednesday will tell us a lot about whether or not we should actually be worried. I'm not worried right now. I have no worries right now. We've seen some of the clips of KP training and moving around. He seems to be fine. And maybe it's just, what's the point of us rolling him out there against Washington, Detroit, even if he's 85, 90%, there's not a point of us, rolling him out there. But I do think versus Milwaukee's 7-3 in their last 10. They've been playing better basketball. Got a win on Sunday. No Giannis against the Suns. Dame has a big game. Chris Middleton's back in their lineup now. I think he's been back for a few games. And so if Milwaukee's at full strength, this is a team that I still, even though we have that 9.5 game lead, and I like the idea of how we match up with Milwaukee, we've really only had one. We had the one game where we just didn't show up, right? And we benched everybody at halftime. So throw that game out. I don't know what you're going to be able to take away from that, other than maybe that gives Milwaukee a little bit of confidence, which it probably does. But that's about the only thing that came out of that game. The other game, the first game of the year they played versus Milwaukee, Boston had the lead most of the night, was in control I think it ended up being a 3-point game on the final box score, but that was the Bucks making a run late. And so I think, we play Milwaukee 2 more times this season, but I think Wednesday is the one that's going to matter more, just because the other one's like basically the last week of the season. And at that point, you're just trying to get to the playoffs. You want to make sure everything's good. And their seeding could be more precarious than ours. Well, as Craig mentioned, 9.5 game lead. I started chuckling when I pulled up the standings. It's like, why do I even bother looking at the standings? I know what it is. But I do think Wednesday is going to be the sign for me of whether or not I'm a little bit worried about KP. I'm with you, Greg. I'm getting, like, if I was at 1.5% 4 days ago, I'm probably at 3 to 5% right now. If KP doesn't play on Wednesday and there's not really a lot of info, then I'll start to get a higher percentage of worried.
I think that when you're not seeing KP on the floor as well, it's a version of data collection anyway. You never know if he's going to need to miss time during the postseason. The more you can get comfortable playing without him on the floor, as the same should be with Tatum and Brown, which is kind of why I was okay with Brown sitting out this game against Washington. If he doesn't play again today, so be it. I haven't seen the injury report yet, but to be fair, I haven't gone looking for it. This stretch here is for me where we kind of just get as much data as we can, and you prepare for every kind of outcome. So you need to prepare for a stretch without Kristaps. You need to prepare for a stretch without Al. The more you can kind of iterate through these absences, even if you're just purposely making them happen, the better it is for you in the long run once you're coming up against the Milwaukees or the New Yorks or whoever you're going to face in the Eastern Conference Finals, or on the way to the finals. That makes sense to me. So I'm definitely not concerned. Now, if we're still talking about this in 2 weeks and it's the Where's Waldo of the Celtics world, then yeah, I think then you start to worry, right? Because as much as the Celtics can survive without KP, he is still their X factor, and you need him once the big games start rolling around. Honestly, I'm not going to read in much to what we see against Milwaukee. I think there's 6 big games left between now and the end of the schedule. If you're just going by team name, not when the games are occurring. If we don't see him in any of them, I'll be a little bit upset. But at the same time, I'm not putting much stock into anything we see between now and the end of the regular season.
Yeah, I think with KP, one other thing to consider, even if his hamstring, let's say it's like 95%, and if this was a playoff game, he'd easily be able to go. It's coming into the season, coming out of FIBA basketball last year. Remember, KP had the plantar fasciitis.
Mm-hmm.
And, one of the things that you often hear with injuries is when you overcompensate for one injury, oftentimes that can lead to an imbalance and then something else could flare up. So maybe this is also some maintenance for plantar fasciitis, which is something that can flare up at other points, so where they're just like, we probably wanted to give KP a 2-week rest at some point during the season. He just had a full week off for the All-Star break not too long ago. So they're continuing to give him these extra extended periods of rest. Make sure that foot is good. Make sure that the hamstring's 100% before you throw him out there. But if I were a betting man, and I've retired the betting slips, I think KP will be on the court on Wednesday for that Bucks game. I would expect the Celtics to look at Wednesday's game against the Bucks as one of those tune-ups for the postseason. I'm expecting heavy minutes from all the guys on Wednesday because let's be real, with the Bucks now being in the 2 seed, for a while, it looked like we might see them in the second round. We're probably not going to see them until the Eastern Conference Finals. We probably don't want to overtax guys later in the year when we play the Bucks again. So let's just look at this game as one of those games where we're truly preparing, as you said, Adam, iterating through scenarios. And then the next time we play the Bucks, maybe that's the time we say, okay, well, if we play the Bucks and this person's hurt, let's see how we would do without Jaylen Brown in this game or without Jason Tatum in this game. Would we still be able to figure out a way to win a big game against the Bucks in the playoffs with one of our big guns being out?
Yeah, that's a good point, Greg. And let's kind of transition our focus here a little bit, and let's just talk about the stretch run as a whole, because Adam, like you said, there's about 6 games that you could really consider as like as barometers or measuring sticks for the Celtics down the stretch here, right? This Milwaukee game is probably the biggest of them, and then there's a Milwaukee New York Knicks game that's right at the end of the season, so that will be kind of time sensitive to see how much and how the Celtics want to play that at that time. But Greg, as you were saying, like, I think this Milwaukee game this week, this is the biggest game left on the Celtics schedule, in my opinion. I think there's a Thunder game mixed in here that I think is going to be a lot of fun. And then I think, if you're really thinking about head to the finals, like you got to give that some serious consideration as to what that potentially could look like.
Pelicans game too.
So they can make a run. Yeah, I don't think the Pelicans can make a run to the. I'm just thinking about from like a potential finals. I personally don't put a lot of stock into the Pelicans as a finals run team. It's definitely a good matchup as far as what that would look like. But with Milwaukee, this is the one for me that I think is, like I said, I think it's the biggest game remaining down the stretch to see if everybody's healthy, what this really looks like, because now teams are both fully formed. This is about as close as you're going to get to without it being the actual playoffs of what these teams are going to look like.
Middleton's
And
back. To your point.
exactly, Middleton's back. As long as Giannis plays, I know he was a late scratch for the game on Sunday against the Suns. This is going to be a fascinating matchup for me to see how Missoula handles it, to see what the Bucks with Doc Rivers look like. Adam, when we just look at this game, we can start to talk about the stretch run as a whole. But let's just start here. What is it that you're looking for most in this Bucks Celtics potential Eastern Conference Finals preview? You're on mute, my guy.
That's a mistake I don't make very often. I think matchups and combinations are going to be the two biggest points of emphasis for me. Just in terms of, we know the Celtics are going to cross match. We know that they like to mix and match their bench in terms of sometimes if you need energy or you feel like O'Shea Brissett's going to give you a boost in a certain area, you're going to go for him and maybe reduce Hauser's minutes for certain games. So that's going to be interesting for me. I don't expect to see like a straight up man for man kind of defense in terms of matchups. I'd expect to see like maybe you put Drew on Giannis. Maybe you decide that Tillman gets all the minutes that Luke Cornett would get because he's going to be more physical and be able to play up on the perimeter and kind of just stay in front of Giannis a bit more on them drives than what Cornett could. Or maybe Cornett's size gives you more around the rim. For me, it's just going to be matchup based. I don't think we're going to learn much in terms of like offensive system, defensive system. I think all that's already set.
Mm-hmm.
It's just going to be ways that Missoula looks to limit that Giannis drive and that Dame Giannis kind of pick and roll. Honestly, I think Middleton's not the player he was a few years back. He's still a concern as a floor spacer and a secondary or tertiary scorer, but he's not somebody who I'm like, he's going to be a major swing factor in one game. Over a series, I think he could have 1 or 2 games where he pops and he is a swing factor, but just on a one-game basis, it's that Dame Giannis kind of duo, maybe with Brook Lopez thrown in there, that I'm concerned about more. And that's why I think these matchups are going to be so important, and who you put on who and how you look to peel off those, or how you have your switching systems executed.
So I want to push back just real quick on one of those points, and that's just the Middleton. I think Middleton's maybe the biggest X factor for me, potentially in the entire
even this version
conference.
of Middleton.
Well, that's the whole point, is if he has a Caleb Martin moment where all of a sudden we get Chris Middleton as being the Chris Middleton that it was envisioned was going to be around Dame and Giannis, like that's a game changer. Like that's, to me, that's what leaves me not scared about the Bucks. That I'm with you. I don't think that version still exists, but if it's, man, what if that version exists for 2 weeks? It's not exactly like Chris Middleton has, he's not, I'm trying to think. He's kind of in a Klay Thompson space a little bit. Yeah. You know what I mean? Where like you just don't know. Like, but you might still get every once in a while a Klay Thompson throwback game. And if Chris Middleton can find a way to capture that, and we've seen him be a Celtic killer in the past. We've talked about that, ad nauseum before he got injured. What was it, 2 years ago, and didn't play in that series? We've always talked about Chris Middleton turns into Michael Jordan when he plays the Boston Celtics. Now, does he have that in him? I don't think so. But to me, that actually is, I think, the biggest X factor, because, you look at the top end talent that this team has. That's the Celtics' biggest advantage series to series, is their top end talent. Milwaukee's one of the few teams that has two guys like Dame and Giannis, even though Dame's not been consistently the Dame that we think of. He's still been good. He's still been, a top tier guy. And so you look at Dame, Giannis, the Jays, and you're like, okay, that's a pretty solid, group of 4. But then I think where the valley is right after that. Right now, the Bucks' third best player has probably been Brook Lopez, and it needs to be Chris Middleton, and Middleton needs to be closer to that top 4 group than he is to the back end of where, Brook Lopez and Al Horford are. And we haven't even talked about Drew Holiday, Derek White, and Kristaps Porzingis for the Celtics. So to me, I actually, and I don't know that he will get back to that, but that is the biggest X factor for me when it comes to Milwaukee Bucks is, can Chris Middleton give you something close to what they were expecting? Because he hasn't, at least from anything that I've seen box score wise, me watching a couple of Bucks games this year, it's just not there. but can he recapture it for a 2-week spell? And we're sitting here, throwing our hands in the air like, well, didn't see that coming. So to me,
Yeah,
that
that's
is
fair.
the biggest X factor.
Well, with Middleton, when you think about peak Middleton a couple of years ago, they were spamming Middleton Giannis pick and rolls in the playoffs, right? That was kind of their bread and butter. You're just not going to get that, and that version of him almost doesn't need to be on the team anymore because they can go to the Dame and Giannis pick and roll, right? That's going to be their bread and butter come crunch time. So I think like the version of Middleton that they need does not need to be the version of Middleton that they had a couple of years back. So that's kind of the first point. Second point, though, I think is the way you talked about him being a Celtic killer, right? I think part of that comes with confidence. Part of that comes with like the fear that you instill in the defensive players. And last year and this year, when the Celtics look at Chris Middleton now, they look at him as like lunch meat. On both ends of the court. They go right at him on the defensive end and they get up in his grill on the defensive end because they don't expect Chris Middleton to have the shake and to have the wiggle to create space anymore. So I think the fear factor of Chris Middleton being a Celtic killer is completely gone from the fan base and also from the players. Even last year, Malcolm Brogdon was all up in his jersey, right? Anytime Chris Middleton did anything, Brogdon was all up in him. He stripped him a whole bunch of times. I think you're going to get a lot of that with Drew Holiday. You're going to get a lot of that with Jaylen Brown. Like this version of Jaylen Brown, if Chris Middleton gets hot, Jaylen's going to be like, dude, I'm locking your ass down.
2 years
Like,
ago, that was a real debate, right? Chris Middleton or Jaylen Brown. Like, who do we think's the better player? That seems like that's definitely in the rear view at this point.
Yeah. So like I'm with Adam here. Like I know you're not saying, Will, that like the version of Middleton right now you're scared of. It's just like what could be if he has the even the Otto Porter moment, like where like Chris Middleton maybe never plays a game of
We've lived through
basketball
some
again.
random stretches of basketball. Look at Andrew Wiggins. Look at Caleb Martin. This seems to follow the Celtics here that we get the best 2 weeks of basketball out of some players' lives.
Right. But I'm with Adam in that, like, I am not worried about Chris Middleton whatsoever. Maybe he'll prove me wrong, but I think Middleton might have 1 or 2 games in a 7-game series where he's effective, but for the most part, I think the Celtics are going to lock that ass down.
I mean, I just want to throw in there as well. I think the biggest downfall for Middleton is he's lost a step of burst, and I think that even if you're playing as a catch and shoot guy, you still need to have that extra step of like burst, because defenses need to respect the fact you can attack the closeout. And if they don't feel like you can attack the closeout, they're going to play you right, as Greg said, right in your grill. And when you don't have burst, you usually tend to lose a little bit of like verticality as well on that jump shot. So you're not reaching, you're not getting as high up on your jumper to release the ball at a high enough apex or see over the defense.
And he already took a lot of contested shots.
Well,
right?
he doesn't.
He had a good vert, right? So he got high up enough that even when the shot was being contested, he could still get that line of sight to the rim.
Exactly.
And people don't realize, like, if you go back to the bubble, one of the biggest things that a lot of shooters were saying was that line of sight is off. Your reference points to the rim is off because there was no backdrop at the back of the rim. If you remember, a lot of players were complaining about this. It led to a lot of air balls to start the bubble. That line of sight matters. That's why the cornet contest is one of those weird things that works, because now you're kind of shooting blind because you've just got this massive body in front of the rim. But it removes your reference point, right? It removes where you're aiming. So I think that lack of burst and lack of verticality that's come through injuries and through the aging process has really limited my fear of Middleton and limited his ability to be a swing factor and like just in general.
And especially the way that Middleton likes to operate. He's a triple threat player. He'll play off the shot fake and off the jab step. And if the thing with the jab step, right, if your jab step doesn't threaten a blow by, I'm not going to react to the jab step, right? And that was so important for Chris Middleton, is he wasn't the fastest guy, but he had a nice quick first step. And that first step it seems to be gone. So if he hits you with a shot fake, jab step, one dribble pull up, like that was his bread and butter a couple of years ago. Very Paul Piercean in the way that he would operate in that mid post area. He doesn't have that anymore. So that, like, when you take away a guy's fastball and now he's a junk ball pitcher, I don't know that Chris Middleton's going to be able to to really make a difference against this Celtics team with this many great individual defenders.
Are you saying Chris Middleton's in his Jamie Moyer era? Is that what you're trying to say right now?
Yeah, he could be in his Jamie Moyer era. Adam has no idea what we're talking
Yeah,
about.
no,
Okay. Yeah, but yeah, Jamie Moyer was a left-handed pitcher back in the day, Adam, who ended up being a junk ball guy by the end of his career.
threw like 70 miles an hour until he was like 45 years old. Pretty crazy stuff. But yeah, I mean, yeah, we'll see. I mean, I like I said, I think I'm more in line with you guys. I just think that for if he somehow and it doesn't even have to be the same version of what he was, but whatever the new version is that puts him in an all-star level category, playing this new role, that for me is like the X factor of what Chris Middleton can be or what he could do. But looking at it from a Celtics perspective, as we kind of focus on not just the Milwaukee game, but things to look for down the stretch here, let's talk a little bit about Jason Tatum, because we talked a few episodes ago about him being that guy, right? Being the guy that's going to go out and get you 30, 40 points. And, you know, we talked about in the Suns game, he went mano a mano with Kevin Durant in that first quarter, because what's everyone always say? Yeah, we love Tatum, but he's just not going to be the best player in the best series. Well, I know we've been down this narrative before. His 2-1 versus Giannis. He's 3-0 versus Embiid. Like, he can be the best player. Like, I just think it's a dumb narrative. But that is what gets talked about a lot from a national perspective. And another trend that we've been noticing, did it last night, and even in Washington, 12 minutes again, playing the full first quarter. Seems like this is trending towards becoming less of a one-off and more of potentially the way that we may see Tatum utilize in the stretch run and into the playoffs. So, Adam, looking at this from a Tatum perspective here, what are your thoughts on how he's being utilized now in that first quarter role, and then what you were expecting from him down the stretch?
I like the first quarter role. I think it gives him a chance to kind of feel himself into the game. It gives him a chance to kind of sit that start of the second or the majority of the second, feel his way into going back into halftime. Like, you know, he's checking in with 5 minutes left in that second quarter. And then getting some wind under him, making an impact against like a second unit or forcing a rotation change from the opposing team in that second quarter. I like it. I think that his overall ball handling, his playmaking and everything is giving the team a punch, especially when that second unit comes in the first. Because obviously you're going to run through JB early in the game because that's the way JB plays. It's the way that you're getting the best out of him. But once he goes to the bench and Tatum's still there, that's when Tatum can start cooking in terms of creating for himself, creating for others. He just orchestrates so much. And then down the stretch, I'm just expecting more of the same. I'd expect him to miss some games, much to his dismay. I don't think he wants to sit out games, right? We've all heard
He talked about it last night too.
Yeah, but you need to. Unfortunately, this is going to be a stretch run where genuinely no one would care if the main Celtics were suiting up for the rest of the season. Like, just get to the point where the first seed's guaranteed, and then we're going to see guys missing every game. It's just the way it's going to be. Yeah. I want Tatum to be one of those guys. He's always had a high mileage on him just because he plays in the summer. He's going to be going to the Olympics after this season's over. So then he's not going to have any rest coming into next season. It's just constant basketball for JT, and it has been pretty much for his entire time in the league. So the more rest you can get him now, even if it means he's a bit pissed about it, like, that's fine. But like, I'd rather pissed off JT coming onto the floor in the postseason than happy I got all my minutes JT coming onto the floor in the postseason, but gassed. So down the stretch, I want to see him sit some games out. I know that sounds kind of stupid because he's your best player, but I think he needs to start getting some rest now because it's going to be a long postseason for him.
Yeah, there's a second season coming up for JT. Yep. You just mentioned the Olympics. I know I'm kind of going off topic here, but do you think that the way that Jaylen Brown has been playing, do you think any of that is fueled by the fact that he just kind of was not considered as one of the top 12 guys? There was a lot of Ant Edwards discussion. There was a lot of Halliburton discussion. And since that came out, JB has kind of been on a tear. Plus the fact that now Jaylen Brown is playing at this definite all-NBA level. Do you think Jaylen's going to end up making that team? I just keep thinking about it because I think he deserves to be on the team personally.
I mean, I think he deserves to be for sure in consideration. I don't think he's going to, because I think part of the Ant Edwards and Tyrese Halliburton is that they're also the next wave, right? Like, not that Jaylen Brown couldn't be. Jaylen Brown's not old, right? You know what I mean? But there's going to be this year where if you're going to get your last years out of KD, out of LeBron, some of those guys are going to take up spots that would be Jaylen Brown's spot on this team. So I think he should be in consideration. I just think that he's probably still going to be tier 2. I'm not saying that's right, but I think the way that they're going to try and structure it is like we have our old guard, we've got that middle ground guard, which is like Booker and Tatum, maybe Embiid, depending if he plays. Bam, that's kind of like the mid tier, and then let's try to have like 1 or 2 role players. That could be the Drew Holiday, maybe Derek White type role, and then you have the Ant Edwards, the Tyrese Halliburton. I don't know if Chet Holmgren's going to be on there. Maybe there's like one other guy that you're like, all right, this is our young core that we're starting to build. And Brown should be in that Booker, Tatum, Bam area. But because I think KD and LeBron are going to take up 2 of those wing spots, he might just get edged out based on a numbers game. But he definitely should be in consideration because he's been straight up balling this.
Can you imagine Jalen, who's Ant Edwards' like mentor to some degree, like big bro energy.
Mhm.
Imagine the 2 of them coming off the bench together as just being like the dogs that you sick on the other team's best players. Like I feel like Jalen would really thrive in that role. Now you just mentioned Booker, and I know Booker has a completely kind of different skill set. He has more of a takeover gene than Jalen does. He can get into the mid range and operate a little bit more efficiently. And there's nobody else really on the current roster that is that Devin Booker type of player, right? That can just like snake the pick and roll and like really operate in there and just like get really good offense. But if it comes down to all the other guys that are on the team, there's enough offense there where like if you're just trying to get more defensive players, like Jaylen Brown is so much better than Devin Booker on the defensive end of the court. So it's just something to consider. I hope Jalen ends up making it, and the way that Jalen is playing right now, I think if the Team USA doesn't add Jaylen Brown to this, especially with Jalen being just like such a good dude, and he would be such a good representative of Team USA in the Olympics, I would be very, very surprised.
Yeah, I feel like it's just going to be the fact that there's other guys that are ahead of him in the pecking order, not because they're better. Well, probably because they're better. They've got a longer resume than him. And then it's positional as well. There's only so many spots that you can fill. JB's not going to take one of those guard spots because, again, if you look at Tyrese Halliburton, he gives you something completely different in terms of playmaking, on-ball creation. And
change the pace of the game.
Yeah, it's just so much of what JB does, you're going to get from the LeBron, you're going to get from the KD. Tatum, to an extent, is going to give you similar kind of rim pressure and being able to bully his way to the rim. I think JB deserves it. I just don't think it's going to be this time round. He may make an appearance at the next Olympics as long as he's healthy and he continues to play this way. And that's no indictment on him. I just think that this is the year where you kind of get that like final LeBron, KD, Steph kind of run.
It seems like there's a lot of the older heads, so to speak, that are going to take some spots.
Yeah, it's the NBA Golden Girls going out for one last like party in Europe before they call time on their careers. Like, and I'm all for that because this team that we're gonna see of like the former superstars has done so much to raise the level of the NBA in so many different ways that I'm actually really going to be quite nostalgic watching them play, knowing that this is one of probably the only time we're ever going to see that contingent all together in like a tournament setting.
I mean, if everyone that they're talking about plays, like this is going to be one of the better Team USAs that we've ever seen. When you think about from a legacy standpoint and talent standpoint, because LeBron really has. I mean, LeBron's lost a step, but LeBron losing a step is still pretty damn incredible, right? And even when we think back to that dream team in '92, like Magic and Larry weren't the Magic and Larry that we really think about. Like they were much elder statesmen. Like LeBron's still playing at a higher level than Magic or Larry was at that 92.
Larry couldn't move.
Exactly. And so like you think about if you're getting LeBron, you're getting KD, you're getting potentially Joel Embiid. We'll see. You're getting Tatum. I mean, this is all Embiid. Basically, you're putting together all like there's not a weak spot from there's no Christian Laettner so far. Like Drew Holiday is the closest thing to a Christian Laettner spot on this team from what's being rumored. And it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to the Olympics, especially when you think about the international competition and how more advanced all these other international teams are. That I think it's going to be a really, really fun Olympics.
Is there any world in which Zion makes it?
No.
You don't think so?
No, I think there's zero chance.
Why do you say that? Just because the Pelicans wouldn't want him playing, or he's just not good enough? What do you think?
I mean, I
think
just
it's
think
more
Team USA
Pelicans.
looks at him. They're like, dude, you're not going to commit. Like, I don't think anybody has any belief of him committed. He barely commits to being in regular season shape. Never mind, especially at the end of a season. Like,
He
I
looks
don't
pretty
know.
good right now, man.
He does. I mean, he. I feel like he does this for like 2 weeks at a time, and then he doesn't look great for another like 2 weeks, like pretty soon after. I think 2 years ago that was a big part of this was like the Tyrese Halliburton and Edwards spots would probably be him and Ja, and that just hasn't really worked out. Like,
Well, I think with, as you guys were talking, I've just been thinking more about it because I hadn't really given this much thought before, just right now. And I think with Zion, there's nobody else that can replicate what Zion can do. He's a singular talent. So when you think to international basketball and you think about how physical of a game international basketball is, I personally would love to see Zion get an opportunity to do that, especially Will, with you bringing up the new guard, and you just mentioned Halliburton and Edwards. Like, they do need to consider like who are the other guys that they're going to do it. They don't want to burn any bridges with some of the younger guys like Jaylen Brown. Maybe you can afford Jaylen Brown like taking an ego hit and next Olympics being like, no, I'm good. I don't want to play for the team. But with
JB's also
Zion,
got unfortunately some of that FIBA stink from a few years ago. That's still
and he was
probably
great.
lingering.
He was great for Team USA when he did play. But I do think Zion is one of those guys where if he ever were to have an experience that would elevate him to the Zion we all hoped it would be a deeper than expected playoff run, followed by an experience with Team USA where they look at him and they're all like, dude, you just got to change your fucking life. And like, we're going to show you how to do that on Team USA. And we're going to show you all of the habits that you need to build. Because, Bill Simmons always talks about the Team USA bump and how important that is for players to learn from the older generations, and being with a team for 6 weeks in the summertime, playing the best basketball you've ever played, could be that experience. And as a basketball fan, I hope Zion ends up dark horse candidate making the team, because I think that would be really fun to see him on Team USA.
I'd love to see how like Spain tries to defend point center Zion in like a fast break position where he's just literally a bowling ball and everyone's just pins. And I do like the idea of him learning from the LeBrons, the Tatums, the KDs, where you are around these guys watching just their entire like regime, right? I think that Zion really needs to just hire Al Horford and just be like, Al, can I live with you for a month, maybe 2, and just see how you live? And then it's going to be okay. Can I just say as well, Al Horford showed some good restraint when he got pushed over in the Wizards game last night.
Yeah.
I don't think that
he was pissed.
Zion.
You saw Al's eyes. His eyes are so expressive, and they just like flashed.
Yeah,
by the way, while we're talking about Al Horford, you can tell Al's getting playoff ready. He's starting to talk a little bit more shit out there. You know what I mean? Like, I love when we get feisty Al, because Al in the playoffs is a completely different guy than what you get, like, to the point that you're saying, Adam, where he's this like very he's very sage. He's got this wisdom to him where he's just like very calm. But then you get to the playoffs and Al loves flexing. Al loves throwing up the tee. Like, I love talking.
Oh, remember when
he's coming
Giannis,
back? I love it.
Giannis that dunked on him last year, and then
that
Al,
was 2 years ago. Yeah,
2 years ago.
I
I was like, all right, let's go. Let's do it.
That's when Al had like the 30 points or whatever it was in game 4 or 5. I can't remember which one it was. And that's one of my favorite Al series to this day. That was unbelievable. Al was awesome in that. And I'm excited that Al's getting back to that point. Because it's just a different element to this team where you get like, oh wait, what the hell? Al Horford just taunted me. Like, this doesn't happen in the regular season.
We talked earlier about like resting guys and whatnot. And they've done such a good job with Al not playing him on back-to-backs. Tonight's game, he's not going to play against the Pistons, right? Because he just played last night against the Wizards, and then he's going to have that full what would it be, 3 days off or 2 days off before the Bucks
2
game.
days
So
off. Yeah,
we're going to get a really good energized Al Horford in that game on Wednesday against the Bucks.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. Anything else you want to add here, Adam, for the stretch run, or anything else that we haven't touched on?
No, I'm good, man. I think that, it's just going to be, fun, but it's also going to kind of just be, it's a stretch, right? It feels like it's going to be a bit of a haul getting there.
Yeah.
So you just got to ride with it.
Let me say this. If you guys got some topics that you want us to hit, please send them in. Just like I said, after we get past Wednesday, we've got Detroit, Chicago, Atlanta, some days off mixed in. There's a couple stretches in here where, if you guys got something you want us to hit, we're going to be more than open to suggestions of what you guys want to hear for us talking about with some of these games. But that game on Wednesday will be big. So tonight, if you're listening to this right after we post, Celtics Pistons, Greg and I will hit you with a post game on that one. And then Wednesday, I'm sure we'll have some stuff leading up to it. And after that game, we'll have some coverage for you. So that's going to do it for this episode of Green with Envy. As always, we appreciate you guys for tuning in. Make sure you are subscribed to the YouTube page. If you want to check out Celtic Chronicles from Adam, we have the link in the description as well. Come join the Discord. Follow us wherever you can. We'll be back on Thursday with another live stream, 5 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Central. Make sure you guys come check us out. But for now, Greg, what are we going to hear on the way out?
You're going to hear Black Sheep Optimus get this high. Peace, everybody.
Let's do it. Peace, y'all.
Every time I get this high, I lose my mind. It don't take much no more until I hit the floor. Every time I get this high, it's you I find. It don't take much no more until I'm at your door.
You cut me to my core, baby. What can I say? You got me on the floor, you know I came to play. I know I shouldn't, but you seem to take my pain away. And every time I score, Jason Tatum fade away. I close my eyes and I'm floating your river. I call to see if you open, you know I hope you deliver. Every time you're getting close, I still be sick with the shivers. But there's nothing like that first time. I still remember the first time I saw you. You were looking so fine.